Some relationships don't break all at once. They dissolve you piece by piece, so quietly you don't even notice you're shrinking until you no longer recognize yourself. And almost every man who ends up in that place gets there through one of six types of women he felt drawn to for reasons he couldn't fully explain. Maybe she reminded you of something familiar. Maybe she stirred an excitement you hadn't felt in years. Maybe she awakened a sense of responsibility, like she needed saving and you were the only one who could. But if you walked away feeling confused, emotionally drained, or strangely disconnected from who you used to be, what you're about to hear will make everything click. Today, I'm going to reveal the six types of women men should never fall in love with, and the warning signs that show up long before the chaos begins. This isn't about pointing fingers at women, it's about understanding the deep psychological forces behind the connections that derail men's lives. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn is the clarity most men go their entire lives without finding. Here's the truth. Men rarely choose the wrong woman because they're naive. They choose her because something much older and much deeper is operating beneath the surface. Patterns formed long before adulthood ever began shaping their judgment. Most men underestimate how profoundly childhood impressions influence their attraction. A tone, a softness, a spark of unpredictability, even a sense of wounded innocence. These elements can trigger old emotional imprints that feel like connection, even when they're nothing but echoes of the past. And once that feeling ignites, logic becomes the first casualty. Then there's the rush, the intoxicating burst of excitement when a woman brings intensity, passion, or emotional fire into your life. The male brain is naturally wired to crave stimulation over stability, which is why a woman who feels electric can convince you she must be the one, when in reality it's just chemistry dressed up as destiny. Attraction becomes a thick fog. Inside that fog, red flags aren't invisible. You simply stop looking for them because part of you is addicted to the high, not the truth. But here's a reality most men never hear. The women who drain you the most aren't heartless. They simply have emotional patterns that pull you in and wear you down, patterns that masquerade as compatibility, patterns that feel like connection but are anything but. Your desire to love isn't the problem. Your inability to recognize who you're giving that love to is what leaves you vulnerable. I once worked with a man who fell for a woman who lit up every room just by walking into it. She was vibrant, compelling, and impossible to ignore. But as time passed, she became a storm he couldn't find shelter from. When everything finally collapsed, he told me, "I wish someone had warned me before I fell this deep." That sentence has stayed with me ever since. Attraction is emotional instinct. Selection is conscious strategy. You can't control who catches your interest, but you absolutely can control who you let shape your life. The first woman to avoid is the chronic drama queen. She lives in a perpetual whirlwind of emotional intensity, chaos, and high-stakes moments that never seem to stop. She's captivating at first. Her energy makes you feel alive, like you've stepped into a world charged with adrenaline. But behind that allure is a truth most men only notice when they're already entangled. She doesn't just experience chaos, she depends on it. Drama is her emotional fuel. Her life runs on what I call the chaos dopamine loop. Each spike of emotion gives her a rush. Every moment of calm feels like withdrawal. Stillness makes her uneasy. Peace feels foreign. So she stirs things up, arguments, misunderstandings, crises, anything to recreate that familiar intensity. It's why her friendships collapse, why she's always fighting with someone at work, why her family interactions are explosive. These aren't accidents, they're patterns. The signs show up earlier than you think. Wherever she goes, conflict follows. Every week it's a new feud, a new falling out, a new problem she's the helpless victim of. The details shift, but the story never changes. The smallest inconvenience becomes a dramatic episode. 5 minutes late, she spirals. You didn't text back fast enough? She's convinced you're abandoning her. Her presence slowly floods your life with tension, gossip, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. And without realizing it, you slip into one of the roles she always assigns: the hero who must rescue her, or the villain she blames when the chaos turns inward. When you love a woman who thrives in turmoil, you don't get a relationship. You get a series of unpredictable episodes, high highs, crushing lows, and a slow erosion of your peace until you forget you ever had any. Eventually, you become the target of the very storm she can't live without. Pay attention to how she treats her world, because the day will come when that same storm knocks on your door. The second woman to avoid is the manipulative, nice girl. On the surface, she's everything a man thinks he wants: gentle, affectionate, thoughtful, endlessly supportive. She makes you feel chosen in a way that seems genuine and pure. But her sweetness isn't the danger, it's the disguise. She doesn't manipulate through anger. She manipulates through softness. She doesn't push with force. She nudges with warmth. Instead of confronting you, she subtly guides you toward guilt, obligation, and self-doubt. Her influence is quiet, which is exactly why it's powerful. She begins with what I call micro love bombing, not the overwhelming theatrical displays you associate with obvious manipulators, but a softer, more polished version that feels thoughtful rather than excessive. She observes your emotional needs with unsettling precision and feeds them back to you in tiny, calculated moments of tenderness. She shapes herself into the image of the woman you've always imagined, the one who listens deeply, supports your ambitions, and understands your vulnerabilities with uncanny accuracy. And just when you let your guard down, when you settle into the comfort she crafted so deliberately, the real conditioning starts. It slips out in lines that sound gentle on the surface, but carry a quiet pressure beneath them. I guess I just care more than I should. Or, I never imagined you'd treat me like this after everything I've done for you. These phrases aren't expressions of hurt. They're emotional switches designed to redirect responsibility back onto you. Suddenly, you find yourself trying harder, explaining more, working overtime to reassure her, all without realizing you've been nudged into a place where your effort is expected, not appreciated. Even her compliments evolve. They transform into soft jabs wearing the mask of affection. "You look great today. I was starting to think you'd stop trying." The tone remains warm, but the impact lands like a pinprick to your confidence. Bit by bit, you start questioning yourself. Are you doing enough? Are you disappointing her? Are you failing in ways you didn't notice? That's the power of this dynamic. It doesn't break you suddenly. It erodes you slowly. And whenever tension rises, she instinctively shifts into fragility. She becomes the misunderstood one, the gentle soul who only wanted to love you, the person who somehow ends up hurt, no matter how softly she speaks. Her vulnerability is deliberate. It casts you as the caretaker and her as the one you must never upset. Before long, your relationship no longer feels like a partnership. It feels like a responsibility you're desperately trying not to mishandle. You stop loving her freely. You start managing her reactions, and that, in her world, is the entire point. A woman who turns kindness into a form of leverage isn't nurturing you. She's orchestrating you. Real kindness is steady, uncomplicated, and stable. It doesn't tighten around you when you stop performing. The only way to see her true intentions is to watch whether her warmth stands alone, or if it always requires you to sacrifice a piece of yourself to maintain it. Then there's the third type of woman men must avoid, the serial social climber. She is graceful, poised, and effortlessly engaging. She gives you a sense of importance simply by focusing her attention on you. She laughs at the right moments, listens with intention, and leans into your words in a way that makes you feel uniquely valued. But her fascination isn't with your character. It's with your access, your world, your proximity to the things she wants to reach. To her, relationships are not built. They are leveraged. Every connection in her life serves a purpose. She has a finely tuned instinct for status. And it's not just material wealth that sparks her interest, but influence, visibility, and opportunity. People are not partners. They are stepping stones. It starts subtly. She asks about your work, your aspirations, how you move through the world. She praises your drive, your achievements, your discipline. But then her curiosity widens. She becomes invested in your network, who you know, how often you see them, what doors they can open. She lights up when you mention someone who has clout. She becomes noticeably more attentive when she senses you occupy spaces she wants to access. Her pattern becomes unmistakable. Her excitement peaks around your opportunities, but fades during your moments of quiet normalcy. Her expectations grow, but her contribution remains surface level, charm, presence, and a curated image polished enough to blend into the environments she wants to enter. She aligns herself strategically with your trajectory because your upward movement amplifies her own. And if your momentum pauses, or if you stop extending opportunities her way, she doesn't confront you. She simply dissolves. She becomes slightly colder, slightly less available, until her interest transfers to someone who can pull her higher. If she's more in love with the doors you open than with the man holding them, step back. The simplest test reveals everything. Remove the spotlight. Take her into a setting that offers no prestige. When the glamour disappears, so does the illusion. Authentic connection thrives in humility. Self-interest suffocates there. Then comes the fourth type, the perpetual victim. She is not loud or dramatic. She doesn't manipulate through charm or intensity. Instead, she presents herself as gentle, wounded, and chronically misunderstood. She carries a softness that makes you want to protect her, and that instinct is exactly what traps so many men who fail to recognize the pattern beneath her sorrow. Her life is a tapestry woven with tragedies, heartbreaks, betrayals, unfair circumstances, all delivered with a sincerity that makes you feel like you're the first person who has ever really listened. But within every story lies a constant theme. She is always the one who was mistreated, never the one who contributed to the problem. She is attached not to healing, but to remaining hurt. Pain isn't an experience for her, it's an identity. This is more than misfortune. It's a psychological loop built on learned helplessness, where she repeats the same emotional patterns with different people and clings to whoever offers comfort. Her connections aren't built on accountability or growth, but on the sympathy she receives. She uses sorrow the way others use charm, as a way to secure closeness. The signs appear quietly. Every ex was the villain. Every friend who left was disloyal. Every setback was someone else's doing. And her daily life becomes a series of, "You won't believe what happened to me again," delivered with a tone that keeps you oscillating between rescuing her and worrying about her well-being. At first, it feels noble to support her, but little by little, you transform into the emotional anchor she depends on. And once she attaches to you, it becomes your unspoken job to carry the weight she refuses to face. But the moment you can't absorb everything for her, because no one can carry the entire weight of another person's unresolved past, you quietly become the next chapter in her catalog of hurt, the next disappointment, the next name added to a long list of people who let her down. A woman who is bound to her wounds cannot build anything with you, no matter how much compassion you offer. So watch how she reacts when you give her gentle truth. A woman who's ready to evolve pauses, listens, and considers her part. A woman anchored to victimhood shifts the blame instantly. And that one difference reveals everything about whether she's capable of partnership or simply looking for a refuge she can collapse into. Then comes the fifth type, the commitment phobe in disguise. She doesn't run from affection the way obviously avoidant people do. She doesn't shy away from closeness. In fact, she gives you just enough warmth to keep you tethered. A touch on your arm at the right moment, long conversations that stretch past midnight, a soft look that makes you feel chosen in a way you haven't felt in years. But don't confuse these intimate moments with emotional grounding. What she wants is the sensation of closeness, not the responsibility of maintaining it. Her emotional rhythm is shaped by fear, the fear of being confined, the fear of losing independence, the fear of letting someone close enough to see the parts of her life she can't curate or control. So she constructs a pattern that allows her to feel connection without ever surrendering to it fully, a push and pull dynamic that keeps you orbiting her unpredictability. It starts quietly. Her energy fluctuates between deep intensity and sudden distance. One day she's wrapped around you, texting constantly, planning your next week together. The next, she's withdrawn, overwhelmed, suddenly needing space. If you ask what's wrong, she assures you it's nothing. She just has a lot going on. She avoids clarity because clarity requires commitment. Ask her what she's looking for, and she'll give you something vague like, let's just enjoy each other and not label everything, or why rush? It sounds relaxed, but it's actually evasive, a shield. Her past follows the same script: relationships that almost became something, connections that fizzled for reasons that always point away from her, exes who were too demanding or too eager. What she's addicted to isn't love, it's pursuit. When things feel uncertain, she's alive. But when you finally show up with consistency, she pulls back. Not because you're wrong for her, but because seriousness activates the fears she hasn't dealt with. This is where most men fall into the trap. They chase harder, they prove more, they stretch themselves thin trying to soothe what they didn't break. But the more you pursue, the more she retreats. Her inconsistency is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of her fear. Speak directly, call out the imbalance, define your boundaries. Because if staying connected requires you to shrink your needs, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in survival mode. Then there is the sixth pattern, the overly controlling perfectionist. At first glance, she seems nurturing, precise, and incredibly thoughtful. She notices details others overlook: the way you take your coffee, how you breathe when you're stressed, the routines that make your day easier. It feels like care, it feels like attention, but slowly, subtly, that attention shifts from affection to supervision. Her need for safety rests on everything being done correctly, not correctly in a general sense, but correctly by her standards. Beneath her polished surface is a mind driven by anxiety and fear of disorder. And when you enter her life, that desire for control extends naturally to you. At first, her adjustments seem harmless: suggestions about your clothes, advice about your schedule, small corrections delivered with sweetness. But what begins as guidance gradually becomes a quiet takeover. Soon, she speaks as though she knows what's best for you in every situation. Her concern is wrapped in gentle phrasing, but the expectations behind it are rigid. You hear more about your shortcomings than your strengths, more about what needs improvement than what you're getting right. Her standards rise faster than you can meet them, and the more you adjust, the more she tightens her hold until you find yourself losing bits of your autonomy just to avoid conflict. The hardest part is that she doesn't view her behavior as control. She sees it as love, as care, as structure. And when you push back, she interprets it as resistance, ingratitude, or irresponsibility. But control disguised as affection is still control, and the only way to protect your identity is to set boundaries early and firmly. If she respects them, there's a path. If she pushes against them or reframes your boundaries as a personal attack, then what you're dealing with isn't a relationship. It's a system she expects you to fit into. When you step back, you see that these six women are wildly different on the surface. One thrives on chaos, another manipulates through gentleness, one chases status, another clings to her wounds, one dances with intimacy only to flee from it, another controls under the guise of care. Different personalities, different methods, different ways of pulling a man in and wearing him down. But beneath all the variations lies a single thread running through every pattern: emotional imbalance. Each of these dynamics places you in a position where you aren't meeting halfway. You're compensating, you're rescuing, you're proving, you're absorbing, you're adjusting, you're shrinking. And when a relationship forces you to become smaller just to keep it functioning, it's not love. It's survival disguised as connection. Because the moment you shrink yourself to fit into someone else's emotional world, you stop being a partner and start becoming a character in a story that was written long before you arrived. And in that story, you're not standing beside her as an equal. You're assigned a part she unconsciously crafted years before she even knew your name. A role that feels meaningful in the beginning, because being needed can feel like being valued, but slowly becomes a weight you weren't meant to carry. At first, it feels almost noble. You step in with good intentions, offering support, stability, and the kind of presence most men are proud to give. But gradually, you realize you've been placed into a position that drains you more than it fulfills you. Not because you're weak, but because no relationship can thrive when one person becomes the primary source of emotional fuel for the other. You start noticing how your energy keeps the structure standing, how your strength becomes the foundation she leans on, and how your stability becomes the glue holding everything together. And even though you care, even though you want to help, something inside you begins to sense that this imbalance isn't sustainable. These dynamics don't disappear easily because they tug at the core of a man's instincts, the urge to protect, to uplift, to anchor someone who seems lost or overwhelmed. And while those instincts are beautiful when shared in a healthy bond, they become a trap when triggered by someone who doesn't rise with you but sinks into you, someone who hands over responsibility instead of sharing it, someone who confuses emotional dependence with intimacy, someone who calls her reliance love, when in reality, it's a burden she expects you to carry indefinitely. But here's the truth that frees you. You're not responsible for fixing the wound she refuses to heal. You're not obligated to rewrite her past or compensate for what others failed to give her. Your job isn't to repair, rescue, or rebuild. Your only role is to recognize when a connection is misaligned with the man you're striving to become. Not every woman who draws you in is meant to walk beside you, and not every spark deserves a future. You don't need to transform anyone. You just need to choose with clarity. Attraction may be instinctive, but selection is a reflection of your identity. When you start paying attention to patterns instead of emotions, everything shifts. You stop reacting to chemistry and start responding to character. You stop confusing intensity with compatibility. You stop letting your desire to be needed override your need for peace. You've already seen how certain behaviors drain your strength, disrupt your mental space, and slowly chip away at your sense of self. And the lesson that stays with you long after the feelings fade is simple. Loving someone isn't the difficult part. The real challenge is choosing someone who protects your peace, honors your boundaries, and meets you at the level of emotional maturity you've worked hard to cultivate. These women aren't villains, not the dramatic ones, not the charming manipulators, not the ambitious climbers, not the anxious avoiders, not the perfection seekers. They're simply carrying emotional frameworks that don't align with the life you want to build. They're not wrong, they're just not right for a man who values balance, honesty, and reciprocity. And you deserve those things more deeply than you've ever been told, because you've been taught to endure, to stay, to push through discomfort and call it loyalty. But real strength is knowing when a connection is costing you more than it returns. It's recognizing when your peace is being traded for temporary affection. It's understanding that stepping away isn't abandoning love. It's choosing a version of love that won't require you to lose yourself in the process. Every red flag you acknowledge protects a piece of your future. Every boundary you enforce safeguards the life you're building. Every moment you choose clarity over chaos, you reclaim authority over your emotional world. And now the question becomes simple. Which patterns have you met in your own life? And what did they reveal about the man you're becoming? If this message brought clarity, subscribe to Hidden Waters. Share your experience below. It might be exactly what another man needs to hear today. Walk forward with intention, choose with purpose, and never again sacrifice your peace for love that costs you your self-respect.